Hello, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of UberEther, Nok Nok, and Caresoft, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Transforming Authentication from Executive Orders to Phishing-Resistant Solutions. At this time, I would like to introduce our presenters for today. Matt Topper, President of UberEther, and Dr. Rolf Lindemann, Vice President, Products, Nok Nok. Matt and Rolf, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Let me steal the screen back from you, and then we'll get rocking and rolling with the team here. So just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Let me just hit the share button here real quick. Hopefully, actually, I lied. Let me stop and reshare one thing. Hit that. We'll hit that. And then we'll come back. Sorry about that. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Obviously, over the last few years, there's been a race of fury across the federal government for phishing-resistant authentication, as well as providing more than just PIV during a authentication event. So today we're going to walk through some of the challenges we've seen across the federal government, making a stronger, more secure reality, as well as some approaches to get agencies and contractors there quicker, both for employees of the agencies, their contractors, as well as citizens. So joining me today is Dr. Rolf Lindemann of Nok Nok Labs, and let's get started. So, as I said, we'll walk through, talk about today's digital landscape, the challenges, why a FIDO-based solution, and why it's kind of the next generation of web PKI, something we've kind of built all of our security around in the federal government over the last 20 years, but at a more sustainable and scalable approach. We'll dive in a little bit about the expertise of Nok Nok and why UberEther chose them for our IAM Advantage platform, and then our strategy in helping agencies become more phishing resistant and offering alternative credentials. So from there, an introduction. This isn't an exhaustive list, but you can see since 2020, here's a list of documents that talk about phishing resistance, new credentials to support employees, contractors, citizens across the federal government. And over the same time, we've all seen the rush to work from home during COVID and continues today. We've seen the increase in focus on citizen services and providing more digital services and zero trust. All of these things have started to drive us to stronger, better authenticators for everyone we work with. The thing you'll glean if you decide to read those thousands of pages of documents is that phishing-resistant credentials are no longer optional. No longer is it easy enough to send an SMS or send a magic link to prove the person has their email. We need something stronger. And in the guidance that came out last month for CISA, they made it pretty darn clear. If your MFA isn't FIDO or PKI, it can get phished. We love PKI in the federal government, right? We've built everything we have, machine to machine, human to machine, human to human, digital signing, everything around PKI. But that's because we have a tight, closed ecosystem. As we start working with other federal agencies, other countries, citizens, PKI is a little hard to manage. So we're going to walk through some of that today. At the same time, we've got a lot of digital threat challenges going on. As we move to SaaS providers, no longer is everyone logging into a VPN every morning or showing up at a single location and plugging their laptop in to be securely on the network. Right? We're not going through a centralized choke point anymore. We're going directly to those internet services that the agencies and organizations we support provide. We aren't able to really control that authentication at the endpoint anymore. And where we still have passwords, a lot of those credentials have been reused. And I'll go into that a little bit and kind of drive some of that point home. But let's talk about it.
My voice is my passport, verify me. Today, there truly are no more secrets. For about $50, I can replicate anyone's likeness and voice. I can easily pay the 18-year-old kid at Best Buy $500 to generate a new SIM for your cell phone. ChatGPT wrote me a script to take last week's list of over 3 billion compromised email addresses and passwords from Netflix, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, LinkedIn, and over a dozen more, and combined it with the previous breaches from Facebook, LinkedIn, Capital One, and Anthem Blue Cross. I then filtered that data down to people in the DC area. I then screen scraped LinkedIn for people matching those names and locations to find government employees and contractors. I then provided ChatGPT with a list of the resulting government and contractor organizations and asked for the patterns for their email address. I could have just as easily scraped that data from sam.gov and found people in leadership positions in those organizations. Anyone want to bet what happens next? I did all of this in about 4 hours for less than $100. I'm just a random nerd with a computer. This took almost zero technical skills, just some Google searches and creative prompts. Anyone in the world can do this today. You don't have to be a nation-state actor. With all that data, you just have to start working the list until you find a hit. Now take a different approach, but this time target public citizens at risk and all the federal funding through the pandemic. Let's sort the data where the same email account used the same password across multiple breaches. It's no wonder that FinCEN saw over $212 billion tied to identity-related fraud in 2021. That was a 5 times increase over the previous 8 years. That was before the recent boom in AI-generated attack capabilities. Can you imagine what that fraud hockey stick now looks like just 2 years later?
And the scary part is, I didn't say a word of that. Not only is the story true that I took last week's release of over 3 billion compromised credentials with usernames, email addresses, passwords, compared that to the list of previous breaches from Anthem Blue Cross, LinkedIn, filtered it down into DC, Maryland, and Virginia. But that whole video was AI generated. I didn't speak those words. None of that video was ever recorded in my office at home. I'm actually not even at home as I'm doing this today, on vacation in North Carolina. That's how quick and scary this world has changed. And we just got info about a month ago from /Next State of Phishing report. In just the last year, almost 1,000% increase in phishing attacks. Right? I think we've all seen it with the spam coming to our phones through SMS, with people doing push notifications to our phone and making it seem like there's a glitch in the system until we just hit yes to get rid of the annoying pop-up. This isn't going to get easier. And without the stronger credentials in place, we're just going to see those numbers from FinCEN rise beyond 212 billion a year to 300 billion and beyond. It's already moving with many of the recent hacks across some of the identity providers out there, some of the largest ones in the world, going after the administrative accounts and taking over full organizations. We've moved beyond web applications and networks as the attack points. It's the identity systems today. We have to do better together. In the federal workforce, many of us are working remotely. The PIV and CAC stations aren't easily available. I think a couple weeks ago, we heard that they're going to start rolling them out to all the post offices, but that's going to take years. A PIV gets broken, it's no longer working, it gets locked out. I live in a different state from the agency I support. I'm getting on a plane in many cases and flying out and losing productivity. Or worse, The agency is just giving me a username and password every day until I can get there so I can remain productive. I can't check a lot of my federal customer emails from my phone, right? Unless they're giving me a corporate managed phone, I can't look at that stuff. I can't authenticate into websites to see what's going on. I have to have my laptop with me. And a lot of times it's multiple laptops with me, depending on the agencies I support. Right? That's not what we need to drive things forward. Additionally, that PIV, that CAC card, or Howell's going to kick my butt. I called it a CAC card. That CAC, it's just a credit card with a pin on it. That a lot of people I've seen have it in that pin in Sharpie on the back or a sticky note attached to it. There's nothing that is tying me to the devices I use, to my historical patterns of what cell phone brand I use, what operating system that runs, what version of that operating system. Same thing with the laptops I use, right? That's a giant piece with so much telemetry, just that consistency of the people, the places, and the thing they use to come back to the agency. And then on the citizen side, many, many times we're stuck with username and password and an SMS. But every one of those people is carrying, well, I wouldn't say everyone, but I would say 90% of the people interacting with agencies online, they're using a laptop that supports FIDO credentials with trusted platform modules inside to store those keys locally on the device. They're using cell phones where they log into their bank every day with their fingerprint or with a face match, right? It's the norm. And it's terrible that we don't provide that simple and ease of use to the citizens, which also increases the security. Adding the credentials, it's easy, right? Giving them those stronger authenticators is easy. And we'll show you that more today. The identity proofing side is the hard part. But a lot of times, if you're building that trust of the same device, the same people, the same person, the same patterns, you're pretty sure who that is behind the keyboard without necessarily having to go through some of the identity proofing challenges we have today. So with that, we'll go to our first polling question. So to make sure everyone gets their CPEs today, why are traditional credentials often considered vulnerable to phishing attacks? These should be a layup. Hopefully you all have the answer already. All right, we'll give this about 20 more seconds, 15, 20 more seconds here. And then we'll dive a little bit into why FIDO and phishing-resistant credentials are different than what we do today. See, people are paying attention. Well, yeah, traditional credentials are too complicated. Changing your password and making it 16 characters every month or every quarter is actually proven less secure, but y'all got it. All right, so from a problem with today's OTP approach, right? You put in your username and password. Obviously, majority of the time, it's if you're in an organization that is forcing you to change your password every quarter, it's probably winter 2023 exclamation point right now, or something to do with, right, something you know, your children, the day you got married, the day your spouse was born, right? Easy things that are reused all over the place, or some variant of that that can be a predictable pattern. I can spoof that username and password. I can spoof the device you're coming from. I can go pay the kid at Best Buy a couple $100 to give me a SIM card that comes from your phone and take over your OTP. Or, right, so if you're doing smishing is the term for that through SMS, or vishing if I'm calling you on that phone and announcing to you what your PIN code password should be. Even more so, I can compromise the Etsy host file on your machine or the DNS to the website you're going to and point you directly to a clone that looks just like it.
And
go ahead, Rolf.
Yeah. So this is really the next thing, right? How FIDO provides phishing-resistant MFA. And to get into that, it's good to and important to understand how phishing works in the first place. And the two main challenges we have today is that fake sites look legitimate. So there's no way for a user to really understand whether the user is entering passwords, usernames, and other data into the legitimate web page. And second, there's no way for the server to understand whether the credential comes from the legitimate user or just from a man in the middle. And these two topics together combined are really the source, the root cause of our current phishing problem. And maybe a few words, right? FIDO was created in 2012. That's a long time ago, right? And the idea was really to address the phishing issue and reduce the world's reliance on passwords. Was created, co-founded by 6 companies, including Nok Nok, and was officially launched in 2013 later. And I remember still when we started that, we were with 6 people in a room having a bold idea. And last month I was in Carlsbad, California at the FIDO conference, the Authenticate conference, with more than 600 attendees. And it was really nice to see that so many people are now talking about the deployments. Now, back to our phishing challenge. How does FIDO address that phishing problem? You see 2 things are different. The first is there's no secret that is transferred from the user to the relying party. That was always the case with passwords, but also with OTPs. And second, the selection, which secret belongs to what kind of web page, right? So whether that password goes to your banking account or goes to your email address provider, the webmail provider, right? That is today your decision. Tomorrow, the FIDO client automatically knows that. The FIDO client will automatically take the credential for, in this case, rp.com, if you want to authenticate to rp.com. But if there is someone in the middle, like a rp-secure likely.com, which could be the case, right, that looks legitimate to most users, but for the web browser, it is something different. And that difference for the web browser, that is the important aspect here, that the web browser can tell the authenticator, oh, now you have to use the rp-secure credential, and the authenticator says, oops, I don't have anything for that. And there is nothing that the user knows that the attacker could social engineer from that user, right? To give that like a password away or the OTP away, right? The FIDO key you cannot give away like that. And number 3, the man in the middle with that doesn't know the user's private key, can't steal that private key from a server, different than passwords you could steal from servers, right? Those 3 aspects together really make the FIDO approach phishing resistant. And that is the key part here. That is what you don't get today. And by the way, that concept of phishing resistance is called verifier name binding in the SP 863 specification. And this is what you get with all FIDO authentication methods. With that, you get a lot of benefits. The key benefits are listed here. Right? The first and foremost thing, it's already there. It is supported by the browsers. It's supported by the platforms natively. So there is nothing to install, no middleware, no drivers, no plugins. And unlike PIF cards, it is compatible with mobile devices. Right? So it's really, you just tap a security key with NFC support to the back of your mobile device, or you plug it into the USB-C port of your computer, laptop, smartphone, tablet, right? And this gives you practical support for remote onboarding. Remote onboarding of new employees today really is a challenge if you have to tell people how to install those middleware drivers, how to really get this whole thing going bootstrapped. That works much easier. The ability to create a derived credential from a PIV allows you to use all that FIDO benefit, right, even in the government context. With that, you can also support the bring your own authenticator concept, where people would just buy, for example, security keys from their preferred vendor, and you could verify, you as a relying party, as the agency, can verify the security characteristics through a method called attestation, which lets you understand whether this is really a FIPS certified key, for example. And security keys are an option, or platform authenticators are another option. And that really depends on the use case, the scenario you have in mind, which one is the best solution. And security is scalable up to AAL3, which is the highest level that you can get. So let's look into that, why this is the case. Next slide, please. This gives you two-factor level security with phishing resistance. And the good thing is in a single step, right? So the first is you provide some kind of username to the system, often remembered by the platform itself. The platform will prompt you to provide a user gesture, which is the first factor in that. In this example, it's a fingerprint. So it's a biometric inheritance factor. The second factor is a private key that stays inside the device and is just used for authentication to create a signature. And then towards the server, it runs a standardized FIDO protocol, which is a challenge response cryptographic protocol. And then the server verifies that the key and the signature is valid and that the key is trusted. And then the server lets you in. Next slide, please. And in exactly the same way, you can use a security key. And this is built into all our existing platforms. This is a great thing. Remember the PIV card world where we are in today. In most cases in the government, you have to install middleware drivers. It's complicated. It works in some browsers and you need a different plugin for a different browser, have dependencies on different versions. You need to keep it updated, etc. Now it's all moved into the platforms, which makes it simpler, and it's maintained by the platform. So it's updated automatically through the platform, and the simplicity of the user interface is also maintained by the platform vendors to make it easy. So you just have to drive that user experience on the client side, where app SDKs will help you, and verify and orchestrate all that on the server side, where our solution, combined solution, will do the job and make it very easy for you to operationalize FIDO. Next slide. Now looking in the NIST specification a little deeper, there is a multitude of different authenticator types. The three most relevant ones are listed here, and the FIDO example as well. The first type is single-factor cryptographic devices. Right? This is by themselves, just stand alone. They provide AAL1 level security, but in a phishing-resistant way. And the example on the FIDO side would be a FIDO security key with user presence check only. Right? It's just some user touches a button on the security key, as opposed to the owner of that security key or a specific user has been verified through a PIN or a biometric. The next one, multi-factor cryptographic software, up to the authentication assurance level 2, AAL2. Examples are FIDO platform authenticators, like with sync passkeys or device-bound passkeys, with FIPS level 1 validation, which is required when procured by federal government agencies. You get that compliance. If you bring your own authenticator, that doesn't matter too much. That doesn't apply in that case. And platform authenticators are, and that is a good thing here, an integral part of your device already today. So nothing else to carry, nothing else to purchase, to get or ship to users. It just works. And they use the same biometric or PIN modality that is also used for screen unlock. So users know how to use those authenticators, and do that typically very quickly. All right. So with that, AL2, multi-factor cryptographic software, synced passkeys, device-bound passkeys that are FIDO examples for those authenticators. The last one, multi-factor cryptographic hardware, that could be TEE-backed platform authenticators using device-bound keys, but I haven't seen any implementations with the FIPS validation for that, but at least FIDO security keys with user verifications do the same. So dedicated security keys with FIPS overall level 2 and physical level 3 do the job up to AAL3, and that is what governments will likely use for their employees and potentially contractors. And by the way, all methods are replay and phishing resistant. So that's all the highest security level that NIST specifies. Next
So
one.
from a usability perspective, with a physical FIDO security key locked down to, so within the FIDO keys, there's something called an AA GUID. So we're able to filter out that says, here's all of the FIPS approved keys that have gone through the NIST and FIPS approval processes. And then we can also say, here is the ability for the user to set a minimum length pin. It behaves just like the PIV card we have today, but you can use it and take it anywhere with you on any device at any time. So extremely powerful. So I'm going to leave this with Rolf, but I just want to say, when we at UberEther started building out our IAM Advantage platform, we looked across a lot of the different FIDO providers out there. And there's a lot of implementations that do the bare minimum. And those include a lot of the other FedRAMP certified solutions. What we at UberEther loved about Nok Nok was its simple ability to integrate across really any platform, any existing identity provider. And then also the fact that, right, they created this space. And with that, they continue to lead and provide some very specific, unique pieces that I can honestly say are more secure than any other FIDO server out there. So enough pumping up Rolf and the team, but
yeah, thanks for that.
Back to you, sir.
Yeah, so really abstractly, right, the authenticators are one piece of the puzzle, but you need a solution to actually use them, right? So Nok Nok actually provides that authentication part. That means all the authentication servers, the support for the rules and the policies to make that easy to configure, maintain over time, right? Change the rules without changing applications and implementations just by configuration. And with that, Nok Nok really operationalizes the phishing-resistant authentication. And that, I think, is a very important part here. Right, so as one of the co-founders of the FIDO Alliance, yes, we have that domain expertise. We know where we come from, why we created FIDO this way, and the spec evolved this way as opposed to PKI. And that is something we learned, by the way, from the PKI space before we even founded and designed the FIDO system. The Nok Nok S3 suite is the most widely deployed passwordless authentication solution. And our technology is proven at scale and powers many successful FIDO deployments today. We really learned from our existing deployments what it takes to bring that to real life, to real users, and make those deployments successful over time. Next, please. And the real point here, the next, yeah, is the different use cases we support and on various different levels, right? It starts with the modalities. Users want choice. Right? It's not that every user has the same preference. If you ask users, you will hear a lot of users want biometrics, but some really like the PIN. And it's great to be able to provide a solution where users have that choice, right? And can use and select from the preferred modality. And by the way, that has an accessibility aspect as well. The second is a client, right? There are different clients. You have mobile browsers, desktop browsers, smartwatches sometimes, mobile apps, hybrid apps, and they all need support without drivers, right? And this is what we provide to give a solution where you can implement applications, native applications, or just a web page that loads JavaScript to run all the authentication. We support any form factors of authenticators, roaming authenticators, platform authenticators, right? Where sometimes the authenticator can be plugged from one device to the next device, travels over, which is great in some situations. Sometimes people do not want to carry additional things. They want the platform authenticator, right? And just go with what is already on the device. You want support for different assurance levels, from sync passkeys to FIPS validated, with all the different incarnations in between, silent authentication, explicit user consent, non-repudiation in some cases, and you want support for different targets. Mostly it's a cloud-based server. Sometimes it's authentication to IoT devices, and you remember all the regulations about not sharing or using shared default secrets in IoT devices. FIDO is an approach for that, addresses that. We support that as well, and allow you to authenticate to call centers, in addition, where today knowledge-based questions are mostly the approach, which are not phishing resistant, and AI is typically a way to address and trick those systems. With our approach, that's much more secure. Next one. So in the government space, we know that it is important to verify the FIPS validation status, right? AAL3 needs to be FIPS certified or validated, the security key. Here's a way to configure our platform that it only allows authentication from FIPS certified authenticators and requires the user verification to be provided, meaning if the user verification is not provided, it might reject the authentication. Right? Very similarly, if the key is not a device-bound passkey at ALL3 level, for example, right, that is not acceptable. So you must deny the authentication or ask for one additional factor. You can configure those things with our platform in a very flexible way, and even change that over time without touching your applications or the system in general. So that makes it flexible to really address all the different use cases which are out there, from employees over contractors to citizens. And with that, next slide, I think we come to the next set of questions.
Yep. And then Rolf, before we jump in, actually, let me pull up the question. But so with which federal standard did we mention as crucial for secure authentication? If you've been in the government for 3 seconds or more, this should be an easy one for you. But based on the previous slide with the policies, one of the pieces that we really dug into with the Nok Nok team as we started to build this out, based on having worked in the federal government in the last 20 plus years of PKI, is that, right, we can say with the AA GUID that, oh, that authenticator, while it was approved by FIPS, after the fact, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, we actually found that there was a vulnerability in that physical authenticator or within that specific trusted element TPM device. And we can revoke from the server side because we have the assertion and attestation statement that says it was created on that type of key or that type of TPM, that the next time we bring the user through, we can prompt them to create a new key, or we can automatically revoke that all from the server side, or we can provide additional factors and have them reattest to close some of those risks and loops. So, right, it's something that not a lot of the other platforms and vendors out there have had the time to mature to understand the impacts of that and the need to do that. So, all right, we got some people that we need to train, but we're pretty good at 87% there. So, all right, so we'll head on to the next slide. But yeah, as I was saying, that policy engine itself, right? We showed the AA GUIDs. We have the ability to pull those pieces back, but we can also use contextual-based things of, could this person actually travel that fast between the authentication events? Or, hey, the person was operating at this level, but now they're trying to go do something privileged. We can force them to step up and say, for this authentication event, we're only going to take an AAL3 credential, not an AAL2. And that's all built into the engine itself. So some extremely powerful use cases. Rolf, back to you.
Okay, let's dig into the different solution spaces, right? It's mainly employee SSO on one hand side, it's supplier access, which are the contractors, and number 3, it's citizens, right? Government to citizen access, which has its own set of challenges, and it's completely different, and we will look into how that differs from the others. Next slide, please. Let's start with the employees and contractors. Starting with the authenticator selection process. Again, it depends on the security level you need to get, right? AL2, when procured by federal government agency, FIDO platform authenticators using FIPS 140 level 1 validated crypto would be an option. Bring your own authenticator works as well. In that case, any FIDO platform authenticator or passkey and any FIDO security key would work as well, where really it's platform authenticated, as you see, integral part of your device or the security key you bring with that. If you want or have to go to AL3, the FIPS level 2 validated FIDO security key is a way to go. And in the end, you use attestation to verify the security characteristics at the registration time, right? Or potentially pre-registered FIDO credential as an option for security keys. So next. So talking about security keys, really there are multiple options there. It's not only a single security key available, not only a smart card. There are small USB plugs that typically stay in the computer, and also ones that you might want to put on a key ring and carry around, but also smart card form factors and even rings you could put on your finger, all with FIDO, FIDO certification. And that is great that there's an entire ecosystem that was created. And so there are many vendors out there selling FIDO security keys. And they support different transport protocols like USB or NFC or BLE. Right? Some of those security keys are FIPS validated. Some are not. Some examples are given here, like YubiKey 5 FIPS, right, is one. Fashion Identif has one. Typically, they don't support biometrics. At least I haven't seen a FIPS validated one with support for biometrics. Let's see whether that changes over time. But even then, I think from a security key perspective, people are used to enter pins with their PIF cards. So that might be a very similar user experience, with the exception that in this case, it works with mobile devices easily. So you tap your security key. If it's NFC enabled to your phone, if it's BLE based, you don't have to do anything, just approve on your security key that you want to sign in. Now talking about deployment, next slide. There are two deployment alternatives, and we have described that in the FIDO Alliance guideline for US government agency deployment of FIDO authentication. Users with existing PIF cards easily ask those users to sign in with a PIF card and then allow/suggest a FIDO process. And what that means, we will talk about on the next slide. And users without PIF or before they get a PIF, right, you need to create a digital identity record, the non-PIF version of that, determine PIF eligibility, and the sponsor, of course, in-person proofing, biometric capture, all that, then triggers a FIDO process. And if the person is PIF eligible, after that, you can trigger the PIF process and promote the pre-PIF FIDO credential to a derived PIF credential, which then allows you to really do all the things you could do with a PIF card as well. Next one.
And that second use case there, just to add, right, that gives us an ability of, if somebody does have a PIV that goes bad and they can't get to a station, we can prompt them and walk them through adding a FIDO token or deriving that as a secondary credential, or enabling them on their first day to do a certain amount of work. And then once they get their actual PIV, then they get access to more things. But it opens up a lot of doors for the challenges we see onboarding employees and contractors in the federal government today.
Yeah. So next slide is about the FIDO process itself. Even there, we have different alternatives you could go. The traditional way is online registration, meaning there's a browser or a native app which triggers the FIDO credential registration after doing some kind of legacy authentication, which could be the ID proofing one, or it could be the PIF authentication or whatever other credentials the user might have. But in addition, next slide, there are two more options which are now evolving, growing. The first is of the other methods is a pre-registered FIDO credential, so that the agency asks the vendor, the security key vendor, to put the FIDO credential on that device, on the security key in the factory. So it's like a personalization, very similar to smart cards. And the FIDO credential then will be imported to the FIDO server, only the public part, obviously. And then the security key is shipped to the user, but ready to use, right? So you can no need to install drivers, just use it as you are used to that with existing whatever credit cards and even PIF cards, which are ready to use once you get them. But this is a quicker process. And the third one is for agency-provided authenticators or security keys with enterprise attestation enabled, a very specific concept that allows you to even track the serial number, to inventory tracking for authenticators which are not personalized to a specific user necessarily, but they are purchased in bulk, given out to a user, so assigned to a user, and then you can write down the serial number once you hand the authenticator or the security key over to the user, and the system will automatically be able to verify that serial number once that security key is being registered. That's growing. It's not there in FIPS with FIPS certified security keys yet, but I'm sure that will come, and it helps you to give you more options for the FIDO process going forward. Now,
So
next slide.
Real quick, let's unravel that a little bit for the folks that are listening in. So with the new methods and a partnership that we've established between Nok Nok, UberEther, and Yubico, we can go to the Yubico headquarters, generate keys that are specific to the federal government or specific to your agency. When we're there, that can also generate pins on those keys that can be locked away into the credential service provider that UberEther provides. We can then store those keys and individually ship them out to the users as they're onboarded to your organization. We can have them jump online, validate who they are from an identity proofing perspective, whether that's join a video call, do a selfie match, right? Those typical proofing processes. And then from there, we provide them with that PIN to unlock that token because we've validated their identity online. And then the first time they use that key, we have them bind their account to that key, and then that original one from the factory goes away. So we've completely securely onboarded them, kept the PIN to unlock it to ourselves until we've proved that the person behind the keyboard is who we expect it is, and then allow them to create their AAL3 level credential directly in the field from home. And then constantly tie that back to the inventory of keys that we have and associate them immediately with those people's accounts. So extremely powerful and enabling really a new onboarding approach. So for citizens, let you roll, Rolf.
Yeah, so let's move over to citizens. Completely different situation, right? It's now non-PIF eligible people, right? Rolling out PIF cards to the general public doesn't scale. That doesn't work in practice. And so we know and we see the demand for e-government services is growing. The lack of trust limits its use today, right? And you see the stats on that slide. So it's published information, and the number of attacks increase. So there are multiple drivers. The final one is the federal mandate to offer phishing resistant to agencies, to offer phishing resistant authentication to public users, which are the citizens, right? And result net is the only practical option you have today for phishing resistant authentication for citizens is really FIDO. PIF cards don't work, other PKI doesn't work, doesn't scale to citizens. So in large populations, FIDO is the only way to do that broad mass scale authentication to the masses. And this is, I think, what we will now talk on the next, whatever, 2-3 slides. So next one. The FIDO process is slightly different, right? The first is less options, right? They have no PIF card, so you need to create the non-PIF digital identity record. You do some kind of ID proofing, which could be a remote document authentication procedure. It could just be an email address check, depending on what kind of level you really need. It could be an in-person check. And finally, you trigger the FIDO process, where the FIDO process itself, it's also simpler, right? You don't provide the authenticator to the user typically, right? That's not the business of agencies in most cases. The user will come with its own authenticator, which in most cases will be a platform authenticator, but it could also be a security key because some users already have security keys and they like security keys. But it's roughly, whatever, 95% platform authenticator, maybe up to 5% security keys at this stage. Then the FIDO credential creation is triggered in the authenticated session after user authentication or the identity verification process. And finally, you verify the credential attestation to determine the authentication security, authenticator security level. And you see the screenshot. So this is a user experience in some way, right? Use a touch ID to sign in, right? That's obviously on one specific ecosystem platform. Other platforms have slightly different terminology, but it's all the terminology that platform uses already. So users are used to that terminology. So in summary, the citizen process is completely different because you cannot force citizens to do something really, right? They really go with what is the most easiest approach for those citizens. And this only practical way is a FIDO approach in this case, which brings us to the questions on this one.
All right, so question number 3. What is one use case we discussed for enhancing login methods? These are all options for enhancing login, but I think we only discussed one of them. And on the 4th one, we probably should have said using a single static password for all applications and users. That would have definitely told you not to pick that one. But
very convenient.
I saw Mr. Schmoyers on the line, so I'm guessing he picked the last one, but I know better. So yeah, obviously moving beyond username and password and pivot to provide other options. So at this point, I'm going to steal the show back from Rolf. So at UberEther, as I've mentioned a couple times, we've built the IAM Advantage platform. Too many times we saw government organizations get stuck in the implementation, the deployment, taking 12, 18, 24 months to really show value in their identity and access management programs, both for their internal employees and contractors, but also for citizen-facing services. So we've taken a best-of-breed approach to provide a fully FedRAMP High authorized, as well as up to DoD Impact Level 5. So if you're at a moderate, a high, an IL2, an IL4, or an IL5, we're able to service you with this platform. So the benefits of what we've done is simplified, automated. We were able to get a very large DoD customer up and running with their enterprise sources of data within 2 days. And at the end of the first week, doing full joiner, mover, leaver, employee, contractor use cases, showing them exactly based on their data what would have been triggered, started, stopped, prevented. In this case, also showing FIDO registration after those accounts were created and provisioned within a week. And I doubt you can point to another program that you're able to move that quickly. Everything's pre-integrated, so we kind of call it a choose your own adventure of identity, but You can pick one part of the platform or you can pick them all. But when you pick more than one, you know that those pieces work together in a best practice approach that's been proven for at least 5+ years in production running environments. Over 100 use cases built out of the box. Not only is that for for employees and contractors, but also for citizens and B2B partners or external agencies federated in, or also disconnected use cases. A lot of times, if you're out on the water, under the water, in a theater, you've got partners you're working with. They don't always have the same strong credentials you do. You can allow them to federate from their home organization, their home agency, but then create a local FIDO credential that they can use to authenticate to that trust boundary or offline. And then they also, out of this is you get our collective expertise. When a new FIDO authenticator is a FIPS authenticated authenticator is approved from NIST, we tell you about it. We give you the option to take that and use it on day one. You don't have to be in charge of going out, finding it, adding it, right? We tell you. We're proactively looking at the system, the patterns, the best practices, and providing that to you with the federal government use cases in mind. So part of the platform, we have 3 levels that we provide, automated. The difference between us and everybody else is your keys, your tenant. Nothing within your boundary when you buy from us is shared with anybody else. You run on your own hardware. You run on every single machine is encrypted with an encryption key you provide to us. The encryption keys that are the signing keys that are used within the platform are unique to your tenant, right? You don't have the worry of a vendor leaking one of their shared keys and being compromised. It's all done for you. All the POAMs, all the patching, all the upgrades, all the CVEs done by us. And we're continually pushing updates, improving the platform, making sure that they are fully hardened, stigged, day over day, release over release, and attested by the US federal government every 30 days. And the other benefit that we liked about Nok Nok was its simple integration. One of the challenges we see right now happening with a lot of agencies moving to phishing-resistant credentials is they're locking it into providers that have no way to move those keys somewhere else should you decide to change. We all saw that problem when we deployed PKI 20+ years ago, when there were certain certificate authority vendors that wouldn't allow us to escrow the keys and move to a new platform. And the federal government ended up paying for sometimes over a decade to keep those things on life support. Right? Don't pick a provider where they're going to lock you in, and the only way to move away is to re-register every single one of your users. Nok Nok allows us to plug in to any and all of these providers and provide a centralized source for phishing-resistant credentials that can be used and reused to one or all. If you're an agency that tells me you're down to one IDP, I'm going to tell you you're lying, because I haven't found one yet. And there's no reason we should have to have users register to Okta and to Ping and to ADFS with different credentials. Nok will provide you that bridge. And then just beyond just the authenticator piece, we also add active protection. So we're looking at the user activity logs. We're able to do active session recording across the web pages that they visit and help you follow their paths, and through behavior flows, look at what's the normal flow and what's the abnormal flow, and where people stop or where they kept crawling because they were a bot. Oh yeah, we also do bot protection as well as IP and domain reputation. So when you authenticate, we figure out, is this a Tor exit node? Is this a brand new registration of that domain for that exact endpoint. Right? Did that just get spun up in the last 24 hours claiming to be that organization you work with? Are they federating over from a new IP address that they weren't federating from yesterday because someone took and stole their root signing keys and stood up their own identity provider that they're trying to contact you with? I've had to call other agencies twice in the last 10 years to tell them they've been compromised because their users were federating over to agencies we were protecting. And we were the first to tell them that they were in trouble. And then with that, we have 360-degree identity threat detection and response. So we're driving that into our SIM and SOC capabilities, going through user behavior analysis with the behavior flows from the previous active session recordings and calling out the risky users. And then that's driving back into our identity platform that can execute what we call the cyber kill chain of that's a risky behavior. We don't even have time for the SOC to look at it and do an investigation. We're going to disable their account and kill their active sessions. Right? All of that as part of our managed platform. And then the speed to execution, I mentioned a large DoD organization up and running in a week, right? That's fully authorized. We're normally working with the agency, connecting, integrating, ongoing operations within weeks versus it's normally at least 12 months when you're doing it in an agency with an agency level authorization. Quick case study. This is a organization we worked with to do derive PIVs, where we've seen the person before. We've seen them use that CAC before. So we know this is a trusted device. We know that they have a PIV that we trust. And then we allow them to immediately derive a credential. Not only did we derive a credential to a physical authenticator with a PIN on it, we also put a secondary FIDO token on the device to say, hey, we know this device too. So now we've got a strong pairing of not only the user, but also the devices they use. So if they go and start using a different device, okay, it's the same location, it's the same person, but it's a new device. It gives us an option to then say, we need you to identity proof, or we need you to go on one of your other devices and go ahead and approve that this is a new known machine that you just picked up, right? We worked through this with them and saw extreme adoption, as well as an increase in security when people started using new devices or in shared contexts where they were moving between a call center every day and saw some very peculiar patterns started exposing themselves very, very quickly because of that strength of really bringing that identity into a FIDO-based world. So with that, as I said, if you want to build out a larger platform, all the little ends on the screen are where we use Nok Nok to protect. But we've also got some of the other major vendors that I'm sure you're familiar with to bring you into a full picture of identity. So with that, we will wrap up today and open the floor to any additional questions that may have come in. And then Rolf and I just completed with a bunch of other cast of characters the FIDO Alliance white paper for government deployments. So feel free to reach out to us at hello@UberEther to request a copy of that, and we're more than happy to provide that to you. We can give you a briefing on Nok Nok and our ability to provide phishing-resistant credentials through our IAM Advantage platform, as well as help you pilot some of those pre-reg keys and enterprise-attested keys that we talked about to show how secure onboarding can happen with FIDO credentials today, as well as how to quickly deploy device-bound keys to your citizens. So looking at questions, so Ron Kara, hey buddy, mentioned that there's a new NIST Rev 5 requirement to be validated against a bad or breach password list before a change can occur. How can Nok Nok help mitigate this requirement? And yeah, it's going to be a significant cost and change. So, I mean, if we don't have passwords, that's no longer a requirement, right, Ron? So I think that's the best answer. But additionally, right, we can use the factors that we have to migrate away from that and quickly add a FIDO credential where we can kill the password. And then Nok Nok, Cindy can support, Rolf's going to answer, but as many keys as you want, right? And they can be YubiKeys, they can be other keys, they can be number of devices, the same way you might see when you log into a Gmail account. Here's all the devices that you've logged into. The same thing is available through the Nok Nok tools as well. And we can also limit that if you want as a policy, or prompt the user to say, you haven't used this key in X number of days. Do you still have it? Or should we revoke that for you? And that can be part of their login experience, that we help them attest their own security instead of replacing their password every 30, 60, or 90 days. So any other questions? Rolf, anything better for that answer than what I provided?
No, I think it's fine. Maybe one addition, you can even add or combine security keys and platform authenticators for users. And we can tell you which one was used, and you can enforce that through policies as well. So that in case you need a lower assurance level authentication, the platform authenticator can be used. And just for the higher security levels, if you need to achieve those assurance levels, you would might want to invoke the security key, right? As Matt said, we can support multiple ones, but even you can support combinations of different models of authenticators.
Yeah. I'd be more than happy that when I go in to change where my paycheck is going every 2 weeks inside of the HR system, that they ask me for the strongest authenticator I have so that it doesn't go into someone else's bank account. And that's a real thing that we can do with Nok Nok and FIDO. So it's pretty amazing, some of the use cases we've been able to very, very quickly solve. And we didn't even dig into some of the IoT and machine-to-machine identity pieces where we can fully attest the hardware in anyone's cloud you're working on and make sure those workloads aren't being moved somewhere else without you knowing it. And that's all the way down to the hardware in that virtual environment. Or when you spin up a new device within an operational environment, it registers to your identity provider for your agency. And you can attest that no firmware changes, no hardware changes have happened from the factory. So some pretty amazing other use cases that we didn't even get a chance to dig into today. So with that, if there's no more questions, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Here's both mine and Rolf's email addresses. So as you can tell, we're pretty passionate about this and making things work and make them work easy. So more than happy to schedule some time to chat and see how we can help you achieve some of these goals.
And thank you for listening and watching.
So I want to thank you again, Rolf and Matt, for your participation. That was a great presentation. And I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. We hope that you found this webcast informative and helpful to you and your organization.